Welcome back, travelers. In this episode, we're traveling to Heidelberg, Germany, a timeless little town nestled along the Neckar River. And today, we're diving into its incredible history and charm. Before we explore the castle in the next part of this journey, we're starting right here, in the heart of the town itself. Because Heidelberg isn't just beautiful, it's layered like an onion. It's intellectual, it's romantic, and it's been shaping history for over 800 years. Heidelberg's earliest roots go back even further than the Middle Ages. The region was originally settled by Celtic tribes, and later Romans established military camps and roads here because of its strategic position along the river. In fact, archaeological remains of Roman settlements have been discovered throughout the entire area. But Heidelberg truly began to rise to prominence in the 13th century. It officially became a city in 1196, and by the 1300s, it was already growing in political and cultural importance with the Holy Roman Empire. Then came a defining moment. In 1386, Heidelberg became home to Germany's oldest university, Heidelberg University. And that single decision changed everything for this town. The university attracted scholars, theologians, philosophers, and scientists from across Europe. It became a powerhouse of intellectual thought during the Renaissance and even later during the Enlightenment. Over the centuries, it has counted dozens of Nobel Prize winners among its faculty and alumni. But beyond the prestige, the university actually shaped the very soul of Heidelberg. It gave the town a youthful energy, curiosity, a culture of debate, poetry, and philosophy. Even today, as you walk through the old town, you'll see students filling cafes, biking along the river, and gathering in the squares just as they have for hundreds of years. And let me just add here that the layout of Heidelberg's old town hasn't really changed much since the medieval period. I love it. All right, let's go. Dominating the square is the Church of the Holy Spirit. It's a Gothic landmark that has stood here since the 14th century. It once housed the famous Palatinate Library, and that was one of the most important collections of Renaissance manuscripts in Europe. Heidelberg didn't have an easy history, though. In the late 1600s, during the 9 Years' War, French forces invaded and devastated much of the town. Homes were burned, fortifications were destroyed, and the region suffered deeply. And yet, it rebuilt. Again, in the 18th century, lightning strikes and fires caused additional destruction. But Heidelberg rose from its hardships, preserving its medieval layout while rebuilding in the Baroque style that gives the town much of its charm today. Then came the Romantic era in the 1800s. Heidelberg became a symbol of German Romanticism, a movement that emphasized emotion, nature, and the beauty of history. Artists and writers from across Europe were captivated by the town's setting between river and forest. Even American author Mark Twain visited Heidelberg and wrote about it in his travel book, A Tramp Abroad, describing the town as one of the most picturesque places he had ever seen. The town became known as a place of reflection, inspiration, philosophy, and young love. Unlike many German cities, Heidelberg was largely spared from bombing during World War II. While much of Germany had to rebuild from ruins, Heidelberg's old town remained mostly intact. And that's why when you walk the streets today, it feels authentic and not reconstructed. It's original stone, original facades, and original history. And since we're here at Christmas, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the Christmas markets. When we think about German Christmas markets, it's easy to see the lights and the mulled wine and think they're just about a festive holiday. But they're actually over 600 years old. They started in the late Middle Ages, back in the 1300s and 1400s. And they were just simple winter markets. People would come into town to buy meat, firewood, warm clothing, and candles, and just really the essentials to survive winter. It wasn't really a magical place at first. It was practical. Some of the oldest recorded markets are in places like Dresden and Nuremberg, dating back to the 1400s and 1500s. And many of the traditions you see today, the wooden stalls, hand-carved decorations, nutcrackers, incense smokers, came from medieval craftsmen who sold what they made by hand. Even the idea of Christkind, the angelic gift bringer in southern Germany, was influenced by Martin Luther during the Reformation, when he shifted the focus toward the Christ child. And let's talk about the spiced wine again. Warm spiced wine. It became a way for communities to gather outside during the coldest, darkest time of the year. And that's really what these markets have always been about. Not just shopping, not just Christmas decor, but community. Light in the darkness. A tradition passed down for centuries. And even without the Christmas markets, Heidelberg is a magical place. It's a place where church bells echo through medieval streets, where university traditions continue centuries-old rituals, where locals gather in lively squares that have seen generations come and go.
Yeah.
So there are a few ways to get to Heidelberg Castle. There's a winding road called the Snake Path. There's a tram. And then there are these stairs. There are over 300 of them. And even though it doesn't seem like a whole lot to hear it, I can tell you trying to go up them, it was a lot. It was a whole lot. I think it's important to note that for centuries, this wasn't a tourist climb. This was the way up to a functioning fortress and royal residence. Supplies, wine, building materials, everything had to come up this hill. Also, the castle was built not all at once. It took over 400 years of carrying supplies and construction materials up this hill. And another fun fact, while you're climbing, remember this hill was part of the castle's defense. Attackers had to go uphill, slow and exposed, and that was definitely strategic cardio. Behold the Snake Path. It's called the Snake Path because it winds back and forth in switchbacks, like a snake slithering up the hill. The total length is about 1.5 kilometers, which is just under a mile, and it's from the base of the hill to the castle entrance. And see, in my head, when we had reached the Snake Path, I thought we had reached the top. Unbeknownst to me, the stairs kept going and going and going and going. So let's talk about what you see along the way to the top. You're going to see old gatehouses and defense walls. You're going to see wine storage and vaults. There's houses. There's gardens and terraces, servant houses, worker houses, and of course, there's really some great observation points and lookouts.
You okay? Yeah. My knees.
And obviously, the occasional graffiti. Woo! We made it to the top. And with high fives all around, we are ready to explore the inside of Heidelberg Castle.
Let's rest for a minute.
Okay, well, look, Mila.
Heidelberg Castle was first built around 1214 when control of the region passed to the powerful House of Wittelsbach. The Wittelsbach family were electors of the Palatinate, meaning they were among the few princes who had the right to elect the Holy Roman Emperor. That made Heidelberg politically important and not just picturesque. And the castle, remember, was built in stages over 400 years, which is why you see different styles. Now, it's also interesting to note that the castle was struck by lightning twice in 1764, which left parts of it in ruins. And those ruins were deliberately left because romantic artists and writers thought the ruin look was more beautiful than a full restoration. Heidelberg Castle is known for being home to the Great Barrel. And believe it or not, that's not it, even as big as it is. This one is called the Older Foss, and it was built in 1689. This is actually a replacement because others were destroyed during wars. But why so many barrels? Because the electors didn't just collect money, they collected wine as a tax from regional winemakers. And all that wine had to go somewhere. So let's talk about this second barrel, the famous one. It is the Great Barrel, and it was built in 1751 under Charles Theodore. And let's talk about a little facts. It holds about 220,000 liters, which is roughly 58,000 gallons. And it's made from about 130 oak trees. And it weighs over 90 tons when full. It is one of the largest barrels ever built in the world. But here's a twist. It was an idea of symbolic power. It showed wealth and abundance. But collecting, transporting, and maintaining that much wine was incredibly impractical, so much of the time it sat partially empty. And let's talk about the elephant in the room other than the Great Barrel. Yes, that is actually a dance floor on the top of the Great Barrel. And yes, people literally danced on top of it. I mean, because if you're an 18th century ruler, why wouldn't you host a party on a giant wine tax symbol? And while we're talking about the Great Barrel, we can't not mention the legend of Perkio. Perkio of Heidelberg was a famous court jester, and legend says he could drink enormous amounts of wine. In fact, the story goes that he only ever drank wine his whole life, and the one time he was convinced to drink water, he died soon after. Is this historically verified? No, but the legend stuck, and you'll often see a statue of Perkio near the barrel. And let's dig back into some more history. By the 1500s, Heidelberg Castle wasn't just a fortress, it became a grand Renaissance palace. Several electors expanded it, adding elaborate courtyards, ornate facades, and decorative sculptures. And one major player in all of this is Frederick V. He married Elizabeth Stuart, daughter of England's King James I. For a brief moment, he became King of Bohemia, earning the nickname the Winter King, because his reign lasted only one winter before disaster struck. And what was that disaster? Well, it was the 30 Years' War. It lasted from 1618 to 1648. The castle was heavily damaged. One of Europe's most devastating wars took its toll on Heidelberg Castle as well. Heidelberg was attacked, occupied, and battered repeatedly. But believe it or not, the real destruction was still coming. During the 9 Years' War, which is also known as the French Destruction, troops of King Louis XIV deliberately blew up large portions of the castle. They packed the towers with explosive. And so what you're looking at today, the dramatic broken walls and split towers, is largely the result of those blasts. Nature then finished the job. Lightning strikes, fires, and neglect. And instead of rebuilding it completely, rulers eventually moved their court elsewhere, and the castle slowly became a ruin. Then there was the Romantic era revival in the 1800s, which we previously talked about. In the 19th century, German Romantic writers and painters fell in love with the ruins, and Heidelberg Castle became a symbol of lost glory. And there was one key figure who helped preserve it: Charles de Gramberg, a French count who dedicated his life to documenting and protecting the ruins. Without him, much more of the castle might have been dismantled for building stone. Instead, it became a romantic monument, admired rather than restored.
Well, for the cannons, he of course needed Heidelberg were interested in the fort when the castle was built, and the cannons and stuff. There are those who are more interested.
So Heidelberg, the town, has layers like an onion, but also Heidelberg Castle has layers like an onion. Architectural layers. What makes Heidelberg Castle fascinating is that it's not just one building. It's a collection of palaces built over 400 years, which I did previously state. You'll see the Gothic elements, Renaissance facades, Baroque touches, and then those defensive medieval towers. And each ruler added something, and very few tore anything down completely. It's like walking through a layered political timeline, but in stone. Today, Heidelberg Castle is carefully preserved and protected by the state of Baden-Württemberg. It's managed by an official heritage organization called the State Palaces and Gardens of Baden-Württemberg. And their entire job is to care for historic sites just like this one. That means they oversee everything from preserving these centuries-old stone walls to restoring delicate architectural details to maintaining the grounds and gardens. They handle conservation, research, historical interpretation, and even exhibitions inside the castle. So what are you looking at right now? Well, as you walk through Heidelberg Castle, you might notice these small carved symbols in the stone. And these are called masons' marks. Back in the Middle Ages, stonemasons didn't sign their work with names. Instead, each craftsman had his own unique symbol, kind of like a personal logo. These marks were carved into the building stones after they were shaped, but before they were put into place. And there's a few reasons why this was done. First, payment. Masons were often paid by the number of finished stones they produced. So when a stone arrived at the construction site, the mark told supervisors exactly who had cut it. Second, quality control. If a stone cracked, didn't fit properly, or, God forbid, caused structural problems, they could look at the mark and know which mason was responsible. And third, guild identity and pride. Many masons belonged to powerful craft guilds, and their mark represented training, reputation, and skill. I think it's absolutely fascinating that these tiny carvings connect us directly to the individual craftsmen who stood here hundreds of years ago, long before modern engineering, long before modern machinery, and just shaped these blocks of sandstone by hand. They didn't leave behind written signatures, but they did leave their mark, literally. Moving into the interior tour of the restored spaces that once belonged to the electors of the Palatinate, and they were powerful rulers who called this castle home for centuries. These aren't fully reconstructed to look brand new. Instead, the rooms are carefully interpreted, blending surviving architecture with period furnishings to help you picture Renaissance and Baroque court life. You can almost hear the silk skirts rustling along the stone floors. Chapel at Heidelberg. This chapel is at the very bottom of the entire castle, and our tour guide let us know that construction started on it in the 12th century, and it was one of the few places, or maybe the only place in the castle that had not been harmed by previous wars, bombings, and lightning strikes. So you are currently seeing the oldest part of Heidelberg Castle. Tucked into one of the buildings at Heidelberg Castle is one of the most unexpected and fascinating, if you ask me, museums that you can visit here, the German Pharmacy Museum. It isn't just a random collection of dusty bottles. It's a museum with real history of its own, one that connects science, culture, and the evolution of medicine from the age of apothecaries to the modern era. The museum itself began long before it came to the castle. It was founded in 1937 in Munich as a way of preserving the history of pharmacy and pharmaceutical science, drawing on one of the largest private collections of its kind. World War II changed everything. The Munich building was nearly destroyed in the bombings of the war, and much of the collection was moved for safekeeping. Afterwards, museum leaders needed a new home, and in 1957, the expanding collection found that home inside the walls of Heidelberg Castle. Walking through these rooms, and you are literally stepping back in time. You are moving past fully preserved pharmacy interiors from the 17th through the 19th century, complete with their painted cabinets, workspaces, and furnishings. You're going to see lab tools and shelves upon shelves of historical medicinal substances, more than 1,000 of them, representing remedies once used to treat everything from coughs to fevers. And today, the museum isn't just a niche curiosity. It draws hundreds of thousands of visitors each year just to see how the craft of pharmacy has evolved from alchemy and herb lore into a scientific discipline. And while you're here, don't forget to check out the garden outside. You'll find plants that were grown as part of Horticus Medicus, a medicinal garden tended centuries ago by the court pharmacist Philip Stefan Springer. The garden has been replanted in recent years to reflect that original 16th century collection and shows how important botanical knowledge has been to the healing arts. Wow, look at this view. From up here on the terrace of Heidelberg Castle, it's easy to see why this was such a strategic point. You can see the entire Old Town stretched out below and the river winding through the valley and the hills in the distance. And it's easy to understand that whoever controlled this hill controlled the city. From here, rulers could watch trade move along the river, monitor who was coming and going, and defend the Palatinate from above. This wasn't just a beautiful place to build a residence. It was a statement of power and protection. And as our video is coming to an end and our visit to Heidelberg Castle and Heidelberg, I would like to just add here that we spent most of the day here, walking courtyards, climbing stairs, taking tours, exploring the chapel, the wine barrels, of course, and the museum, and we still have not seen all that the castle has to offer. On the way up, you heard me mention the tram, and that is what we are absolutely taking on the way down. And before I give you a pro travel tip, make sure to hit that subscribe button to see where we end up next. Pro travel tip. Make sure to give yourself plenty of time for Heidelberg and Heidelberg Castle. Again, we spent the whole day here, and we definitely did not get to see everything. If you think you've given yourself enough time, you probably haven't. Thanks for joining us on another adventure.